And then he told another very sweet story. He said that then after that he became attracted to Srila Prabhupada, and he used to come over sometimes and try and figure out ways of getting to listen to him telling nectar and Harikatha. He said Prabhupada would sit out there with some very senior and elder kind of Vaishnavas and Brijbasis, and they would discuss Krishna consciousness. But it wasn't just that anyone could come, so he would kind of sneak around and try and listen, and Prabhupada noticed that he was sincere, but he used to try and do service for Srila Prabhupada, but he said Srila Prabhupada wouldn't take any service from anyone. Like he would say, oh, please let me just do this, let me take out your trash, let me do this, and Prabhupada wouldn't, no need. And but he said one day Srila Prabhupada used to go every day out in the afternoon to the Yamuna, and he said that one day when just as he was leaving, he said, oh, Prabhupada, could I just clean up your room a little bit? And so Srila Prabhupada said, all right, I'll be back shortly. And so he left, and so when he was gone, then this man, he started like cleaning and sweeping the room, and he was getting very enthusiastic. And then he looked up at the ceiling and he saw that there was these cobwebs there. And so he said, I'm going to clean the cobwebs as well. So he started sweeping the cobwebs, and he was very enthusiastic, thinking that this room will never be like this, is so nice and clean. And then when he was finished, he realized that Srila Prabhupada was coming back any moment. And he looked down on the floor and he noticed that there was these little spiders, and they were just kind of wandering around aimlessly and bewildered. Then he kind of thought, uh-oh, maybe I did something wrong. And just when he thought that, Prabhupada came right into the room. And immediately Prabhupada looked on the floor and he saw the spiders. And then he looked up and he saw the no cobwebs. And then he looked at him with fierce eyes. He said, why have you disturbed? What have you done? And he went, oh, I just thought maybe I did do something wrong. I was just trying to clean. He goes, I'll pick them up and I'll put them back on the wall. And then Srila Prabhupada said, These living entities, they are Brijbasis, because they have been here for countless generations, taking the shelter of Vrindavan, and they're not causing any disturbance to anyone. And then we come, because we're newcomers, we're interlopers, and then we disturb. We make so much disturbance. He said, please don't do that anymore. He said, or we will get offense in the Dham. And so this old man, while he was telling that story, he pointed around his room, and there was thousands of cobwebs everywhere. He said, I am never disturbing anything. I'm always remembering Swami Maharaj's instructions to me. He goes, I am very blissful. He goes, even snake or rat come. He goes, I will not disturb. They are welcome. So that was very sweet. He also told how Srila Prabhupada, and I heard this from several people, how even in the heat of summer, Srila Prabhupada would go on parikrama, and he would go to Yamuna, and he would have a kirtan by himself. I don't know how he did it. He had the kartals or somehow tied to one piece with his danda, and he would go to Yamuna, and he would just have this very sweet kirtan. And a lot of times, like the little boys and different people would come and follow him. And he said sometimes, even in the middle of the hot summer, when Yamuna was mostly dried up, Srila Prabhupada would cross over the shallow part, and he would go into where the islands were, and he would stick his danda into the sand, and he would do parikrama, dancing and chanting and singing. Very, very exceedingly blissful, and many people came and joined. It became quite a popular thing in Vrindavan. Yeah, around the danda, yeah. He said he joined several times. One godbrother of Srila Prabhupada's, who was named Nayananda Das Babaji, lived at Champahata, which is in Navadvip. And there's a beautiful Gaur Gadadhar temple there. And it's the place where Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati used to camp on their Gauramandala Parikrama. And so he told some very beautiful memories about Srila Prabhupada, which I'll recall. He said when he was a young brahmachari, Srila Prabhupada was a grihasta in Calcutta, and Srila Prabhupada had a house there, which we know of at Sitakanta Banerjee Lane. And he said that Srila Prabhupada was so humble and so generous and hospitable that whenever there were any brahmacharis from any other godbrothers or any mats or anyone who was preaching in Calcutta from the Dham, Prabhupada had an open door policy that anybody could come to his house, and he had the door open, he didn't lock it. And they would just come knocking on the door, and Prabhupada would, if he was in his room, he would give them his room. And then he would go into the living room and he would take rest. And when they woke up in the morning, he had already done all the seva and everything for his pictures and his think he had little deities. And then he would make prasadam for everyone. So he knew him from that capacity by staying there several times. So he said that because he knew him and loved him, he was always keeping an eye and watching him. And he said even though Srila Prabhupada acted like just a grihasta, who he wasn't living in the mat, he wasn't one of the big, leaders or anything like that, but he had a great respect from many people, especially because he was so humble. And he used to pay obeisances even to the young brahmacharis just because they wore saffron, even though in every other capacity he was senior to them. And he also paid obeisances to anyone who had been initiated before him because he waited those 11 years out of humility. So he said one time he saw a very amazing thing. It was one year when they were at Gauromandala Parikrama, and he said that he was visiting there, his Gurudev, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, that balcony that he had where he used to pace back and forth, Prabhupada told us, and plan out the Krishna consciousness movement and like a warrior king. And he said so he had been out there having a darshan with all the big sannyasis and brahmacharis were there, and he was also there. And he said that just then he finished the darshan and he went into his room and closed the door. And everyone was still sitting out there. And he said just at that moment he noticed this very quiet grihasta coming from, the front gates and coming up, walking up towards where, in the back where the house was, and kind of looking around, and he was carrying a suitcase. Probably had just come off the train, he said. And he recognized that it was his friend, Abhay Charan Aravinda Babu, they used to call him Prabhu. And he saw him, and he was kind of looking around, and then he started to very quietly walk up the stairs. But then he saw that actually his Gurudev wasn't there, and that the darshan was over, and someone said, darshan is over. And so in a very kind of, again, non-invasive way, he just turned around and started, he went like this, gave respects to everyone, and then he started walking back down the stairs. And he walked down the stairs, and he was just walking out towards the main temple. And just at that moment, the doors flung open, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada was standing there. And he looked over, and he saw our Srila Prabhupada walking. And then he said, oh, come, like that. And everyone was kind of looking, what? And Prabhupada himself even looked. And then he saw that his Gurudev was calling him. So he came and he started walking back up the stairs. And all the sannyasis were crowded around the door. They thought maybe it was more of a darshan. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati went like this. And he kind of made a path between them all. And he called for Srila Prabhupada to come there. And then he brought him into his room and he closed the door. And Nayananda Das Babaji, who at that time was a brahmachari, said that everyone was very amazed. Even he himself was amazed, but especially the sannyasis who were saying, well, who is he? Why is Gurudev letting him come like that? We haven't seen like that. And we want to go in the room too. And there was a little bit of muttering. But he said he noticed, and he was watching on his clock, on his watch, that he was in there for quite a period of time. Very quiet. No one said anything. And then, just after that, the door opened, and he came out. Our Srila Prabhupada came out. In a very sweet way, he paid respects to each person, like by looking them in the eye and paying respect, looked him in the eye, and then he took his suitcase, and he just quietly walked back down the stairs.